Hey everyone, I decided to have a little quick hangout tonight, but you know how it goes when I say I'm gonna have a quick hangout. That's usually about 8 hours, but no, this one is not gonna last 8 hours. It's not gonna last 2 hours. I'll be surprised if it lasts an hour. Who knows? But because I can't talk too loud, but I did want to talk a little bit about my experiences today on Twitter and the dumpster fires that I was involved with on Twitter, and to clarify a few things because I just think they need to be said. And I know a lot of people have been saying them. Everybody has their own way of saying things. I have my own way, so I don't follow anybody else's way of saying things. I'm not tribalistic. I'm not trying to promote any agenda. I just say what I think. And I think that's what most people do when they have a channel, they have an audience. They basically say what they got to say. And if people want to listen, great. If they agree, great. And they don't, that's fine too. They can come on in and disagree because these are open hangouts. So, anyways, first let me address everybody in the live chat. Shaggy, good seeing you. It's been a while. We got Jenny. We got Logic Beat Speculation. We got Board Hominin. Really like that name. We got Rebecca and Pragmatic Cultures in here, and we got Rags in here. Rags is actually eating, but he was going to join us in a few. But we got Pragmatic Culture from the Non Sequitur Show. He had a few debates in there, and he's actually one of the apologists I can actually stand, so I'm not going to dog on him too much. There are a few red pillars that I can actually kind of get along with. So it's not like it's all of them. It's just a majority. And let me explain why. So let me kind of jump on into it. Today, as people know, I have a very strong stance about people giving money and even, I think, even being a member of the Catholic Church any longer. Now, let me clarify this because one, I don't want to get demonetized. The last couple of videos were demonetized, so I'm not going to be using inflammatory um, propositions. Right? We all know what happened in the church. Okay, I don't need to go into detail on that. So I'm going to just be saying things like reprehensible act, immorality, immoral act, those kind of things. So we all know what we're referring to because I know if I say some other words, bam, within the first 20 minutes is going to get demonetized. So let's hope that doesn't happen. So far, so good. So I've been talking to a bunch of people, and I've noticed a couple things. I've noticed one, and Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like everyone that has a saint for an avatar automatically is on this defensive bandwagon to defend the church. And anybody with the name Red Pill seems to as well. And I noticed that they get a lot of shit wrong. Oop, I said the S word. Hope that's not going to get me demonetized. A lot of stuff wrong. That's another S word, but I can use that one. Yeah, Gates says use Catholic. Yeah, actually, I just say church. People usually know what I mean by that because it's not all churches. Obviously, I'm not anti-theist. Hey, Rags, are you there?
Hey,
Wow.
I am.
Whoa,
I'm here.
God damn.
What?
Well, when your mic's up to gain 30, it has a tendency to kind of.
Well, I'll turn it down a bit.
There we go. Awesome. Now you sound like the Rags we know and love.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Awesome.
Yeah, hangouts is shit.
Yeah, I know. But I was lazy tonight. Not gonna front.
That's yeah.
You get in those moods, right?
Yeah, the other ones are shit too.
They're quick. They're quick. So quick and easy, kind of like a cheap hooker.
Kind of like Discord. Oh wait,
no, it just goes worse. Yeah, it just goes weird. I don't like Discord, but anyway, so I think a lot of people make some fundamental errors on Twitter when it comes to this whole morality discussion. And I noticed I
like having a morality discussion on Twitter.
That's a number one thing that I think people make a mistake in doing. Yeah, except that I think it's good exercise to do so because you kind of get a finger on the pulse of America when you start bringing up these types of topics and you see the kind of whataboutery and I'm going to say, can I say fuckery without getting demonetized? That's out there. And let me kind of point this out. So first, the worst thing you can do in a conversation on Twitter, and I'm going to just tell you guys directly, is to misrepresent your opponent's position or to whom you're talking to. These are not discussions, or these are not debates. These are discussions on Twitter. But I get strawmanned so many times in a day, it's ridiculous. When most of my followers know my positions, but it seems that other people just want to tell me what my positions are without asking me. And then when I tell them, they tell me that's not my actual position. And so one of the things that were brought up today in regards to the church was on objective and subjective, of course, but more importantly, normative ethics. What's normative? And there seems to be a misunderstanding when it comes to my tweet about I don't care if something is subjectively or objectively wrong as much as I care about what is your normative position? And what that means, first of all, let me ask everybody in the live chat, does everybody kind of understand the difference between metaethics and normative ethics? If not, I'm happy to explain them again. I really am.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, so Rag doesn't know. Okay, so for Rag's sake, so everybody else in the live chat, you probably already know this, but you know what? We're going to educate, and we're going to educate Rag. So
Yay.
what a meta-ethical position is Rags, is an overreaching ethical position.
Fuck, this is so goddamn boring.
In other words, if a proposition is true or false or not. So you have what's called a cognitive and a non-cognitive position, right? A cognitive position is basically saying that a moral proposition is truth apt or can handle being assigned a truth or false value. That's it. So, Rags is good looking.
That is a moral fact of the universe.
That's either true or false, right?
That is an objective fact about the reality which we live in. Yes.
Okay, so you'd be a cognitivist because you think that sentence actually has more realistic or more realism things where it actually ontologically is a truism, right?
Oh, baby, I know it.
Okay. I disagree with you because I know what you look like. No, I don't have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I do.
Fucking gorgeous.
But regardless of before you get into the fact as objective, some people don't think that moral propositions express anything that have truth value. They think that moral statements don't have any kind of way of assigning a true or false value to it. Those are called non-cognitivists. Okay, so an emotivist would be somebody that says, hey, stealing is bad. Boo on stealing. Right? It's an emotion. Boo, bad. Right? Boo means bad. That's a non-cog position, or what's called a prescriptionist, which would be stealing is bad. Translates to do not steal. But they're not actual moral statements. So first you got to determine whether someone's a cognitivist or a non-cognitivist. I think people know by now I'm a moral cognitivist. Okay, so that's my position. I'm a moral cognitivist. I think there are moral facts, and I think moral propositions do relate moral statements. Okay, so the next thing would be, if you accept moral facts, are they based upon the individual or not the individual? Or so you can say society too for relativism. But for the most part, if I say Rags is intelligent. Now we know that's not true, but if we say Rags is intelligent, let's just say arguendo, it's true. There might be some objective fact that is true, right? It's not just my opinion, not just Prag's opinion, right? It is a true statement, just like 1 + 1 is an objective fact. Rags can hate math and he can think 1 + 1 = 3, but it's still objectively true. 1 + 1 = 2, right? That's a absolute moral. It's not moral, an absolute objective fact. Morals are similar, except that, like Mackey would argue, that they're not exactly what we entail a actual fact. His argument from queerness is basically that moral facts are strange. They're not like what we know for any kind of empirical fact. But
okay.
But long story short, I don't care what your meta-ethical positions are. So this is your meta-ethical, whether you're objectivist or subjectivist. Do you think moral facts are contingent upon an individual's mind, or do you think that they're not contingent upon that? I don't care. It is so bogged down in nuance and bullshit and people using these words. You go look at 4 books on moral subjectivity, moral subjectivism. You're going to get 4 different ways of them describing it. Okay? So it's really difficult to know what somebody means by it. Moral subjectivists can think there are no moral facts. Some people say that it means there are moral facts, but it's contingent upon a person. What I care about, though, what I personally care about, is your normative ethical theory. What that means is, what ought you do given a situation, right? There's a couple different ways you can go about it. You can talk about virtue ethics, right? What is virtuous to do? You can talk about the rule of law, which is called a deontological approach, right? It's illegal to do something, or it's against a moral law to do something. Or you can do consequentialism. It's bad because of the consequences. I want to know why you will do a certain action. So when we're talking about the church, we're talking about the horrific crimes in the church. I have noticed all day long the red pill religion people spending hours on end trying to determine about objective versus subjective, and caring that I am either a moral subjectivist or a moral objectivist.
Well, who are the red pill religion people?
Oh, you really are sweet. You're so cute.
I
Prag,
am.
I'm a Prag. I'm gonna let you take this one if you would.
I actually wouldn't recommend you do that because I don't like. I know a few of the people from Red Pill Religion. Like I follow Andrew like Straightales or whatever his name is, and I've seen some of his videos, but I'm not like I don't follow Dean Esme specifically or any of those other people.
Okay, fair enough.
I kind of know them through like just periphery
History.net.
happenings on Twitter.
Okay, so long story short, Red Pill Religion actually came about from a movie called Red Pill, where it was about MGTOW and MRA, and one of the guys that were in this movie was named Dean Esme, also known as Max Colby. He doesn't like going by his real name, even though he uses his real name, and he goes back and forth. But if you use his real name, he says you're doxing him, even though literally in all his videos. Matter of fact, his channel was called Dean Esme. Go figure.
All right, so he likes to be called. So his gender is
Dean.
Dean Esme. Okay.
Well, no, his gender would be Max.
His gender is Max Colby.
Yeah, that's
so even though I might disagree, it doesn't bug me. So I'll call him Max Colby.
Okay, so let's call him Max Colby. So he basically in the past has written some pretty brutal blogs on people without any actual evidence of the things they're being accused of. For example, he wrote 2 blog pieces on me. He accused me of harassing his children, Rax. Now the problem with this
Why
was,
did you harass his children, Steve?
well, there's a big problem with this.
Yeah, you shouldn't harass children. That is a problem.
You're right. You really shouldn't. I didn't know we had kids until
well, there's someone out there for everyone. I mean, even Hitler had his Eva.
But how do you harass entities that you don't know that don't exist? I've never even knew he had kids until, like I said, really recently. He doesn't care about the facts, right? He's anti-atheist, very atheist phobic, and everything to him just goes.
He's kind of crazy.
Oh yeah, well, no, he's long past crazy. But anyways, he has a bunch of sycophants, and they all hang out in a room every so often. They about I don't know, 10 to 15 people watching most of the nights. It's not very much. It's usually them. So, but they like to pontificate on morality and think that their view of Christianity is so much better, being moral than everybody else. And one of the things that I listened to in their hangout today, which again not very long, was they brought me up, and it was quite funny because one of the people in there had asked me a question on Twitter: what would you do if you're in a war situation and a child has, a weapon, a grenade, or something along those lines? Would you kill the child? Well, the obvious answer to that is yes. I mean, that's part of the law, the rules of engagement. But what the funniest was, they were questioning my morals because of that, and they didn't even know that it was called the rules of engagement. They totally forgot what that phrase was, what the rules of engagement are. And the rules of engagement in a combat situation is basically what you do in a given situation, and it's it's extremely laid out. You have to have a similar amount of proportionality. You have to avoid unnecessary suffering. You have to make distinctions between combatants and non-combatants. You have to be able to tell if you have people that are medical, or if they're it could be a chaplain or something. Contractors, independent contractors, as opposed to people that are actually wearing colors, which would be the armed forces, the enemy, right? So there are rules that you have to take into account, and of course, there are certain times you have to do reprehensible things. Let's be honest. War is shit.
War is pretty shit.
But that doesn't change my moral framework, because when I get out there and I tell people that I think what the church has done is morally reprehensible to the point it needs to be abolished, I'm not talking hyperbole. I am being dead serious. I have had enough of it. Every day I read the news, another news story comes out, another group of hundreds of kids. Every single day it happens globally. Another one just came out in Germany. It's a worldwide systemic epidemic, and it has nothing to do with the fact that it's a religion. It is a organization just like any other, but the only difference is this one has no accountability. And my argument is that if you are giving money to it, if you are even going at this point, I do find you morally complicit. Now, maybe not criminally, but morally complicit. And when people ask me, well, how do you justify your morality? This was kind of what's kind of set this all off, is when somebody actually asks me, how do you justify saying that harming a child is wrong? And I'm thinking, first of all, I'm hoping
Did
that
someone ask you that unironically?
well, I'm hoping I'm going to get a principle of charity and hoping that they have some actual reason to ask that kind of question, right? Because I don't have to appeal to objective or subjective morality to say harming a child is wrong. That's normative. It's why you do something. Why is it bad to harm a child? You don't appeal to objective or subjective to say why is it bad to harm a child. It is bad to harm a child because it brings harm to the child. The child suffers.
All right. Okay.
Do you agree with that, Bragg? That's normative.
It is normative, but it doesn't make it. That doesn't mean anything though. This is okay. So this
Why
is where
doesn't it mean
this is
anything?
kind of where I jumped into the conversation.
Yes, it is. So be my guest. Jump in.
Well, no, when you say something is normative, like you say, oh, harming a child is wrong because it's harming the child. Well, why is then harm in any sense wrong? Is it if it's survival of the strongest or whatever? If that's your morality, why
Well,
is
you
that
could appeal to
bad?
suffering, undue suffering,
Well, why is undue suffering wrong?
because as humans, right? We got to remember one thing: all moral context is predicated on the fact that we are moral agents. If we weren't moral agents, there would be nothing to discuss about morality. Would you agree about that?
No, I would. I would not.
Really?
I would say yes.
If we were all moral agents,
If we weren't moral agents, if we weren't agents of moral concern, if we were just, I don't know,
if we
beetles
didn't
or
care,
something.
like if nobody ever cared
Yeah.
about it, or we didn't have any concept of it.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that just because we wouldn't be moral agents and we wouldn't be conscious of it, I still think it would exist. And I think this is sort of like the objective morality kind of mindset
Okay,
that
okay.
even if we didn't exist, morals would still
I don't
be
think
there.
From your
agree
point of
with
view,
that.
yeah, he's a moral realist. I mean, he takes moral realism to be literally ontologically, there is moral facts that are somehow written in the universe. Is that what you would say, Bragg?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, I totally think that's bogus, but
I don't think that's true either.
I don't either, but I know his position, right? It's not like it's a unique position. Okay.
Yeah, why does he want to rape children with a knife?
Again, I don't think you have to even go so far to even say it's objectively wrong to harm children. I think you can literally appeal to, as Paul points out, normative morality is what you ought to do. Ought you harm kids or ought you not harm kids? If you, in the red pill religion people, I don't think they can honestly say it's for an ought they shouldn't harm kids, because I don't think they have a proper moral framework to even find anything to predicate anything on. I have a guy right here. I'm reading his thing right now, and he says, so harming kids, or he says, oh, let me see what. Oh, I just lost it. Dang it. It was really weird. He said,
I get what
right here, right. No, he said clearly not, because you think harming children is wrong. Well, wait, and you don't? Wait a minute. I have a bad moral framework because I think harming children is wrong.
Okay, so
what planet is this? Help me out here, brother.
No, I think
Seriously.
okay. So this is where the confusion sort of comes about. I think they're trying to call you on, making these appeals to just harm is bad, and things are bad. They smuggle
No, don't do that, because I got on somebody for doing that. Don't use words like good and bad, because you have not heard me say things like good and bad unless it slips, because I don't want to do a naturalistic fallacy.
What do you mean?
Naturalistic
by
fallacy?
that exactly?
A naturalistic fallacy is framing things about why something is wrong just because it's good, or we enjoy it. Happiness, edamoia. If I say it is good because it makes me happy, right, which is edamoia, or flourishing, that's a naturalistic fallacy about what makes something good. It's very difficult to define what it means to be good and what is bad. So I just leave that out of the conversation. You can read more about that. When I literally mean more, that's his name, more.
Yeah, I would agree that just because it gives us pleasure, that doesn't mean it's good.
Okay, so
I would agree with that as well.
Okay, so I avoid those words good and bad.
Fucking a lot, though.
Okay, so then when you say, what exactly is how do you say, when you say harming, what do you say about harming a child? Like, you just shouldn't harm the child because you just should.
Well, again, first you have to establish the normative ethics. What are you appealing to? If I say it is wrong to harm a child because of consequentialism, which is the fact that he suffers, right? That should be enough justification to at least hold that position. I don't think you need to go much further and say, well, you can't justify not thinking harming a child is bad. Let me get Emperor Atheist in here. I know he loves these discussions.
Well, it's sort of like if you go to different sects, suffering can be considered good. Like you do have to. I'm not saying you have to justify good on bad based on like what is good is what makes us happy, and what is bad is what makes us suffer. But you do have to justify why you would consider suffering a moral wrong and why making someone else suffer is a moral wrong. For example, you could think that by making others suffer, I am making them like internally stronger. I'm giving them a thicker skin and stuff like that. So there's ways to justify it. So you still have to justify why you consider suffering to be something to be avoided.
You could justify that, but that would be your justificatory reasons. People are asking me my justificatory reasons, right? This again is this weird thing when people ask me, how do you justify this? And I tell them, and then they go, what about this? Well, I don't give a shit about that. Go ask them. They can justify it their own way. Right?
Okay.
But do you not think, I mean, honestly, put the philo speak aside, right? Just for a second. Do you not honestly think that if somebody asks you, why is it wrong to harm a child? And you just appeal to a very simple normative ethic of what you ought to do, that you just say because it is undue suffering. You don't think that's good enough justificatory reason not to do that action?
If you want to get into like, well, here's the problem. Because if you want it, what these people are telling you or trying to tell you is that just appealing to something normative is worthless because, and this is something I tried to mention in our conversation as well, like appealing to some justification is meaningless. Like why should your normative justification for something matter? Why should your input matter in a moral conversation?
It doesn't to you. And that's my point. I don't care if you accept my justificatory reasons or not. But if somebody asks me, Steve, why do you feel justified not to harm children? It is because it is undue suffering. Now, you can accept that and go, yeah, you know what? I have the same position. You can reject it. No, I don't accept that position. I think it's this. Take the opposite position. But it doesn't matter. They're asking me my moral framework.
In what context doesn't it matter, though? Because, I mean, if you're trying to justify why all child harm is bad, then you do have to make an appeal to something beyond just yourself, because you know other people can go on to harm children, and if they don't give a shit about morality, and if everybody's just appealing to themselves and their own position to not harm children, then there's no.
But you're always going to get people like that. You're still going to have psychopaths. You're still going to have people that have poor functioning brains that'll think it's okay to harm children. I can't do anything about that. But you're asking me what is a good reason? If Rag said, "Hey Steve, you know I'm having this moral dilemma."
I'm having this moral dilemma.
Okay, follow along with me. Repeat after me, Steve. I'm really having this moral dilemma.
Really having this moral dilemma.
I want to go out tonight.
I want to go out tonight,
and I want to stab a couple.
I want to stab a couple kids.
Can you give me a justification not to?
Can you give me a knife? Can you give me a justification not to?
Yeah, that's better. And Steve, you're awesome.
Steve, we should do this more often.
I got to get on a soundboard. God damn it. Okay, so and I tell Rags, look, the reason that you don't harm children is because it is undue suffering. He could take that as a justificatory reason, right? I ought not to harm a kid, and that'd be fine with him, right? All I'm concerned about, and again, I hate getting into the philo speak because this is actually when I do recruit people when they say, you know what, philosophy is taken too far and it bogs down. This is exactly where it goes to I say they are right, because you don't have to know a lot of philosophy to know it is not good to harm kids, and the church has not only harmed them, but they've covered it up. Now, my question would be, is the moral action a better moral action to leave the church or to stay in the church knowing that there's been so much harm that they've done?
Okay, well, this is it's kind of two separate conversations at some point, because the problem with what was it you just said about justificatory
my justificatory reasons for not harming children is because it's undue suffering to another human being. And again, I predicate morals on the fact we are moral agents, and if we weren't moral agents, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. Just like and I've had this discussion before, and it kind of blew up in my face, but I was still right. You don't have any moral obligations in a dream. Dream characters don't exist. It's an inert reality, right? So I have no moral obligations.
Wait, when you say dream characters, you mean like with people you're making up?
when you are dreaming in the middle of the night and you fantasize whatever it is you fantasize about, please don't go into detail. Those are not real things. Those are not real entities.
Yeah, it's like pixels on a screen.
Right. It's just like in playing a video game. When you snipe somebody in a video game, do you have a moral consideration or duty to them?
I have a duty to teabag them.
Okay, that's a given. That's well, that used to be obligatory, but I think it's actually objectively true that you have to teabag them now, don't you? I don't know.
Yeah,
Depends on the game. Yeah. Depends on the game. So anyway, but you don't have any moral obligations because those are not agents of moral concern, but we are. And so,
well, do you have do you have to have moral consideration for animals?
yes, we're stewards. We're stewards of animals, and first of all, animals do have morals. They're not as well developed as ours, but they absolutely do have morals. They have
Animals have behaviors that we think resemble our morality.
No, I think they're morals.
I think they're morals as well, and they exhibit exactly the same behavioral structures we have, and I think they do know right from wrong. We see altruism in animals. We see compassion. We see remorse. We see guilt. We see when things die. Right? I mean, they grieve, bereavement. Yeah, I think animals are more human than some people.
Well, some of those are emotions, not necessarily morals, and on top of some of that can also be chalked up to, the field of evolutionary psychology is a huge thing, and it's still developing. But there's definitely a field where some of those, quote unquote, morals are group adaptations in order to facilitate better survival. So again, it's moral-like behavior, but to say it's morality is to imbue this sort of a cognitive understanding unto animals that we know they don't have. They don't have an understanding.
I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to have an understanding of a moral principle to be moral. Matter of fact, even if there are objective morality, we may not have access to these moral facts. It's an epistemic thing we have that we can't have access to. We just don't know what a moral fact would be objectively, right? But I don't think that it makes a difference. If I don't want to go up to imper atheist and snap him upside his head, it's probably because I probably instinctively think that's a bad idea to do. Plus, he would beat the shit out of me. But I have a moral consideration because I know that he suffers and he feels pain, and it would probably end up breaking my hand.
Well, okay, so but again, because we're capable of this sort of higher function, we're able to question: does it matter that I'm causing him suffering? Does it matter that this is something bad, or should I be concerned about other people's sufferings? This isn't, and this is sort of why I don't think it's philosophy going too far. It's the fact that we've worked up all these thousands of years to be able to smuggle in these assertions and just as assumptions or axioms in our everyday conversation.
No, I get your point. I get your point, but don't you think that we just have a more developed understanding of those things?
We do at this point, but I still think, but you still have to at some point come back to the basis on which you're justifying your actions or you're justifying your ethics. Like I think to say to appeal to normativity or to appeal to yourself or whatever is, eventually, it sort of runs into what Nietzsche was very keen in pointing out, that if we don't have something, he didn't believe in a God, obviously, but he also knew that we needed something to appeal to in order to keep us on some moral straight path, because without some sort of underlying tenet in our societies, in ourselves, humanity was prone to slipping into moral sort of just horribleness, essentially. And that was sort of, and he was right about that. Mm-hmm. But it's sort of like, what else can there be? Like he thought that you could sort of manufacture a universal transcendental principle through just axing yourself. Like he was sort of, it's one of the reasons you sort of see him quoted by like Nazis and reactionaries to some extent, is because he believed you could create a transcendental principle through strength and through exuding this sort of thing. But at some point it's all self-referential. Like
I know this is going to kind of freak you out, but I'm not really wholly against transcendental arguments.
All right, so okay, that's fine. But my idea is then, if what is this transcendental based on? Like what is?
Well, first you have to establish what we mean by transcendental argument. And by the way, hi Christy in the live chat. Hi, everybody say hi to Christy.
Hi to Christy.
Hi to Christy.
No, don't do it like that. That voice, Rugs. Don't do that.
It's Christy Santiago. Okay, I kind of She appears in my live streams every now and again too.
She's awesome. Go ahead, Rags. Do that voice. It's kind of sultry. You can do it.
Do what now?
Do it. Say to hi, Christy, in your sultry Rags voice.
No, it's
It's over. It's
I
over.
can't. Yeah, the moment's coming.
I know you got to kind of like
Gotta make me
fly.
white again.
So a transcendental, as I understand transcendental, would basically be if X is a necessary precondition for Y. If Y exists, then it necessarily follows that X must exist. That's why I understand transcendentals. Now, the way that obviously Matt Slick does a transcendental argument, yeah, that's a little bizarre. He basically, what he does is he takes a disjunctive syllogism, P versus or P or Q, and then sticks in P or not. He sticks in not P for Q, so you end up with P or not P, and then just eliminates one of the disjuncts and says, "Oh look, P." So you end up with P, therefore P. That's just brilliant. Yeah, it's weird. But let me tell you. Okay, let me tell you this real quick. So on my Twitter, right? I think that I really do express my positions fairly well, especially for the fact that you only get 280 characters on Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, pragmatic, and you've talked to me many times, do you think there's any chance in the world that I don't hold the position that harming kids is wrong?
No, certainly not. And
okay, 1 sec. So this guy just asked, or just told this other guy, a friend of mine, Tim, he said, so he thinks harming kids might be wrong, with asterisks around might be wrong. When I've ever said harming kids might be wrong?
Yeah.
I think harming kids is always wrong, given the fact that you are causing undue suffering. Now, there might be time, and we're not talking about situations like, well, that means you can't give a kid a shot. Obviously, a shot's going to harm a kid, but there's a greater good to be had because of the vaccination, right? The problem I noticed, and this is with all red pill religion people, I'm sorry, all RPRs, they suffer from black and white-itis. Everything in them has to fit in these nice little either black or white. That's it. They don't understand things like nuance. They don't understand like gradients. They don't understand things like fuzzy logic. It is either this or that. And I think that is one of the problems. And that's why most people just don't want to get in conversations with them because when he says something like, oh, well, he's talking about me, thinks harming kids might be wrong. No, I'm sorry, but we're talking about the church here. It is always wrong to abuse children. Always, always, always. And if you want to call that absolutism, knock yourself out. By the way, absolutism is the opposite of relativism, not subjectivism. Okay?
Yeah.
That's a meta-ethical position.
I don't think any of them would disagree with that. Like, I don't think they're certainly not of the position that harming children in any situation is good. Like, I'll speak for them, and I don't think they'll object to me saying that. I do agree with you. Sometimes they get a little bit. Is it too spicy if I use the A word to describe?
No.
I do think they get a little bit autistic in some of their interactions online.
Well, two of them are autistic, and I'm okay, but it's not a big surprise. I mean, this was out. Mr. Brass and is autistic, and he's fully functional. He's an intelligent kid. The problem is, I think he's just fundamentally wrong, and I think he's hanging out with the wrong group.
Well, I mean, I'm using it in like the internet neat sense, of course, but like I think the problem with these.
I thought you were going to say asshole. By the way, I didn't know.
I thought he was too. And then
but that's okay. That's okay.
No, I think the problem is that which they see is that when you talk about something being normative, when you talk about something being or subjectivist or the various positions that aren't referential on something transcended from like the Catholic view in terms of like something like logos, it becomes a game of like, well, what are you basing this on? And that's not an invalid question because at some point where you're deriving your ethics from, like what starting point is important, because it all kind of comes back to, we're talking about ethics, normative ethics and meta ethics and things like that, but it all kind of starts with the metaphysic of the thing and like what you believe to be real and and based on what is real and how things in reality interact, how you believe those things in reality should interact based on sort of what is real. And so
I understand that. I mean, you okay. The one of the reasons I do like you is, even though I don't agree with you, you don't have an incoherent position, right? I don't find what you say to be incoherent. Now, the people on the
thank you
Twitter, it's incoherent. They're just incoherent. Okay, but here's the problem that I have with your position. As you know, I don't think that some kind of objective morality exists woven into space-time. Can there be an objective moral fact? Yes, I'm okay with that. But I'm really distilling my arguments down to now is, and I know this is going to be blunt, but who the fuck cares if a moral fact is subjective or objective? Does it really change anything in my day-to-day life? No, it really fucking doesn't. Okay, all that means is that if I say stealing is wrong, that is just saying that either A is objectively wrong, regardless of what you think, or it's dependent upon what you think. And yes, you can get into a million different what-if scenarios, and those all change the conditions, okay? But talking about stealing is wrong could be objectively a moral fact, okay? But that doesn't matter to me. I want to know what you want to do given a situation. I want to know what you ought to do in a moral decision. And my argument is basically, I think it is immoral to stay in the Catholic Church at this point. I honestly do. I didn't think that last week. I've been edging toward this, but as I more and more I read the news, the more and more I just get frustrated. And if people want to call me an anti-theist toward the Catholic Church now, I'm okay with that because I'm so fed up. Right? I'm just so fed up with people going on Twitter, and all of them have Catholic, all of them have an avatar of a saint, all of them are red pill religion of some kind, and they use whataboutism to try to justify it. They keep on saying, well, what about living in America and paying taxes? What about schools? What about the attacks in schools?
Okay.
That's got to stop. That is just absolutely got to stop.
Okay, so here's what I would say. I don't think so. Two things quickly. I think one of the reasons this went off the handle so quickly on Twitter is because it's kind of two emerging discussions. One is about like the morality of staying in the church after like the whole scandal, and the other is about the metaphysical question of what ethics are based on. And so I think that's one of the reasons it became a shit show, because I understand the link between one to the other, but it's still sort of two separate conversations you're trying to have at the same time, which is annoying. So I'll just focus on
you're very right on that, by the way. You're very, very right, and it is confusing because of that. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just address, like, because we could argue about the metaphysics of shit for hours upon hours. So I'll just stick with the argument about the church for now. And I think the problem is the reason that quote unquote whataboutism is brought up is because it's, for reasons like, you wanting to abolish the church. Like, I think it seems like correct me if you're wrong, of course, but it seems like you and some other people are condemning the church of some very, very unique evil within it that means it ought to be abolished. And if you're accusing the church of a unique evil, then it's fair to point out that this evil exists elsewhere and in higher rates elsewhere, because that's an argument against the church being uniquely evil. So it's not a whataboutism so much as...
No. Let me defend that, and then we get serious in here real quick. It is not unique. I've never used the word unique in any of my arguments. I've never said this is the only place this is happening, but it is the most pervasive, is globally. I mean, if you like, just think about this. If you do a random sampling of 6 dioceses and you have 4 of them have problems in Pennsylvania, and in Germany they did 27 and they had, like, I don't know, half of them or something came back with several hundred accounts. And this happening in Chile, it's happening in California, it's happening in multiple different states. They're investigating now in California. This is systemic at this point. It isn't like, oh, this was just a couple of things that happened in a church, in a school district. This is worldwide systemic abuse, and this has been gone up all the way to the very top. Pope Francis knew about this stuff. You know this. He even defended a couple of them and said, "Oh, it's just just talk. They're just people are just trying to ruin their reputations and stuff like that." Now he's backpedaling, going, "Oops, I should have done more."
Yeah. No. Okay. So yeah, obviously Francis is fuck him, and they're obviously. We talked about this on the one stream on Non Sequitur. I agree with all the changes pretty much to, certain degrees within certain degrees of nuance. I agree with pretty much all the changes that were suggested on that show in terms of helping this abuse be stemmed further on down the line. What I would say, though, is that, so 2 stats real quick. If you look at the rate of abuse which occurs in the church, and you look at the rate of abuse that occurs within the general public, the rate of abuse within the Catholic Church, even though it is coming to light now and it is being intensely focused on by the media, is still lower than what it is in the general public.
Oh, so no, come on.
No, it's absolutely true. I can pull up.
Are you telling? Okay, I'm gonna turn the service here in a second. But you telling me that it is more likely for you to take your child to, let's say, a Boy Scouts or to some other place and have the same amount of chance of harm coming to your child that it is take him to a parish, a local diocese. Are you telling me it's the same? It's the same based upon your numbers there? Because I
It's
think that's going to be
actually
wrong.
no. It's actually safer to take them to the church. Is what the
Wow.
numbers say. Well, listen. I'll give me a second because I pulled
Okay,
up this
no,
article
this is
for
your
our
funeral,
discussion.
dude. Hang yourself on this one, brother. Go for it. I want everybody to hear this. It is safer to take your child to a diocese than it
How
is.
about that?
Okay, so you know what? I wouldn't personally. I love my daughter, and I wouldn't do it that to her. And by the way, she used to go to a Catholic school. So, Cyrus, my friend, welcome back.
How's it going? I just got done recording and now I want to slam my head through a wall, but not because of philosophy.
Oh, well, what say you? Slam away.
Well, I was actually looking up these statistics between particular years on this claim to address this as well as I can. So give me just a second while I'm pulling those up because I didn't have them on hand. I wasn't listening to the live feed at first. Let's see here.
Live feed is asking if he's going to die on this hill. Probably. I can't
Depends
help.
what you mean by die.
I
Man,
can't
it's
help.
so bad that as soon as I look up sexual abuse allegations in the United States, the first image is of a Catholic father.
Well,
Wow.
I'd say there's a couple reasons for that, but for a later discussion.
They're raping kids.
It could be.
It could be
There's a unique hatred of Catholics within the United States from kind of both sides.
I think that's kind of crap, dude. I've never seen that. I have never ever thought that way until very recently, and even I was willing to look past and go, okay, there have been problems in the church. They said they're going to fix it, and I looked past it. But I'm no longer willing to do that, and I'm telling everybody in my audience, don't look past it any longer.
I think it's
they've had their time to fix it.
Like,
Don't look
And
past it.
by the
I'm
way,
not-
one of the guys, and like I said, real quick, one of the guys they actually sent to investigate these things back in the 80s didn't know that child abuse was wrong. He said he didn't know it was against the law. They've lost their right to have any consideration about what they think is moral to investigate themselves.
All right, no, I don't agree with the investigating themselves anymore thing. I'm not a fan of that. But what I'm saying is, you're everybody who's angry at this happening is completely right to be angry, and it's a righteous anger. It's Jesus flipping the tables at the temple with the money changers and all that. It's completely right to be angry in this circumstance. I'm not at all saying don't be angry. What I'm saying is, again, it's a matter of, is this, first off, I know you didn't say it's a unique evil, but it's certainly not. It's just the matter is like when you talk about abolishing the church over it, it's like, no.
Okay, first of all, if this was any other organization, if this was a Walmart, would you be calling for their heads?
For the people who committed the crimes and covered it up, yeah, I wouldn't ask for Walmart to like be destroyed, though.
Yes, you would. You would
No.
say the entire CEO and all the board of directors and everybody else. They need to be. People have been calling for the church to liquidate all their everything, liquidate everything, get rid of the gold, get rid of all their lands, and give every dime to restitution for the abuse victims. That would be the
say that in the case that this is from the top down.
I just want to hit this point home. That is what a Christian would do. That is what Christ would have said.
Yeah, well, again, it's like I'm not disagreeing that.
Then why don't they do it? If this is the Church of God, a Christian church, and as a Christian, you should feed the needy, clothe the naked, feed the hungry. You should make restitution, right? You should be poverty stricken. I don't see any of these things happening.
Okay, so there's poverty. I don't think Christ said to be poverty stricken per se. What he said is to live a humble life, a sort of austere life, but you still need the provisions to uphold yourself. Now, I know there's obviously a lot of grandioseness in the church. I'm not denying that, but hold on. We're getting off topic here. We're talking about. I found the article and
I mean, just over the top, like Trump-like stuff. Yeah,
Well, some of it was built in the Renaissance time, and we were getting money to build it because people wanted us to build it because they wanted to, try to pay their way into getting into heaven. Yada yada.
Planetary indulgences. Yeah.
Yeah, which again, that's another discussion. But I found the article, so may I read just this portion?
They're only venial sins. They're not mortal sins.
I think indulgences are too cheap, and we're letting fucking anybody in.
It was
Yeah.
actually the reverse
I'll do it for,
problem
I'll
back
do it for
when, like,
cheaper.
I'd say you need to raise the price. I don't want a bunch of fucking poor
Dude,
people.
$2, I'll forgive your sins, Rags, and believe me, that's a cheap rate for you.
Well,
Boy.
the problem used to be when Martin Luther was railing against them that originally he was just railing against them because they were priced too high and they were just being sold to the rich for the sake of, the church making money.
Right.
And he saw that. Now that it's sort of like, it's sort of just like the thing about plenary indulgence is it's not just, oh, you give money to the church and some of your sins are forgiven. There are other forms of indulgences in the form of going out and doing good works and doing like the corporal works of mercy or some spiritual works of mercy and all that stuff that forgives your sins too. So it's not like the only indulgences you have are like, oh, just pay off the church. So there's there were more options always than just that.
Okay, but as you pointed out, I mean, the reasons they had this was just to line the coffers. And again, if this is some kind of
Back in the day, yes.
Okay, well,
If it's still being done, then that's still the reason.
yeah, I mean, what do you mean? It's like all of a sudden now the reason's different, even though it's still being done?
Well, no, donating to the church, it's like equivalent to first off, you're supposed to tie to the church. It's considered, everybody's. It's suggested you give 10% of your income to the church. Whether or not people do that, that's like the gold standard. You don't actually have to do that. The church just appreciates their donations, and
Yeah,
They really do.
Yeah, you know what? I guarantee it, and I'm not Catholic, and if I could be wrong on this, that's fine. I'll take correction on this. But I have a feeling if you don't, somebody along the lines is like, you know what, you should be paying this, or here's the the tip plate, here's the tip jar.
Yeah, when I was growing up Catholic, different preacher or different priests would have varying degrees of pushing that angle.
Yeah, I mean, so
no, of course there are some people who are like, it depends. Obviously, it's parish to parish to some extent, but
hang on a moment. Do the basic provisions to live include raping kids?
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? Thank you for bringing us back on topic because I found the article, so I'm just going to read what it says very, very briefly.
Never been happier to get back to
I'm going to segue this super hard right now.
We went 15 minutes without having it demonetized, but
Before you do that, there is one thing that I'd like to point out. There are 17,651 Catholic dioceses in the United States, correct?
I'll take your word for it. I don't actually know.
I just looked it up, so I know. Anyway, so I'd like to point out that of the roughly 700 cases of abuse that have been reported per year in all of those dioceses, of the 700 so cases that have been reported per year from 2006 to 2012, would you like to know how many of those cases have been proven false?
Oh, I would.
Sure. Go ahead, Rags.
I mean, it's on you. You asked if I wanted to know, and I said yeah.
Oh, okay. Fair. So I thought you were gonna say it.
No, this one's on you. If I had to guess, it's 17.
There's a 7 in it. Over 700, there would be in 2006 there were 636 cases proven to be substantive, and there were 78 cases proven to not be. And over the years, that trend has maintained. It's 635 in 2007 with 56 proven false. It's 708 in 2008 with 95 proven false. I would just like to say that that's almost 1,000 cases per year out of 17,000 dioceses.
Wow.
That's a pretty big amount.
That's significant.
Okay.
That's
I'm not denying the significance of it. Of course, when you look at whole dioceses, it then comes down to you're talking about the numbers of victims, not dioceses in particular. How many dioceses were involved in all of these cases? Because you're saying, were you talking about victims, or were you individual victims in individual cases, or were you talking about dioceses?
700 victims, 17,000 dioceses.
Now what was the region?
Over the entirety of all of those dioceses?
This is the region just in the United States.
Okay, but hold on. How many of those? So I get that. So 1,000 victims per year, but it seems like you're saying one diocese is equivalent to one. I
didn't say that one diocese is equivalent. If I did, then I would have said so.
No. I'm not saying that, but it seems like there's a weird compare. I get 1,000 victims, 17,000 dioceses, but a diocese alone could contain something like the city of New York with however many million Catholics are in it. So
there's no set size for a diocese. I found that out.
No, there isn't. There isn't necessarily, but some dioceses are absolutely massive. So if you were telling me that all those 1,000 people just happen to be in New York. Well, compared to the number of parishioners and other people in New York, that's
It's
a
above
very
average.
small amount.
No, I still think it's way above average. Way.
Okay. Well,
But here's the bigger picture. Let me ask you, Prague.
sure.
The problem I'm seeing is the fact that there has to be a system in place inside that church that allows for these things to happen for so long without something being done about it. It has to be not only just covered up, it has to be actually actively a mechanism in place to protect people. Would you not agree with that?
No, I
Yeah,
would
that's
agree
the
with that.
two-witness
Okay.
rule, isn't it?
What's
No,
that?
well, Jehovah's Witnesses do that. Does Catholics do that as well?
Is that like is this like the Muslim thing where it's like you need at least 3 or so people to say you were raped or something?
No, Jehovah's Witnesses have the 2-witness rule. I don't think I've heard that for the Catholic Church.
I don't know what that is even. Like, what can you explain it to me?
So in Jehovah's Witnesses, they have this thing where if you make an allegation against somebody else in the church, the only way to prove that it's substantive is to have 2 witnesses say that what you're saying is true, which almost always leads to any case of abuse to a child or any case of abuse to a family member getting dropped.
Yeah, that's crap.
Jehovah's Witnesses have a huge issue with protecting, like they protect rapists as much as the Catholic Church does. In fact, actually, they hemorrhage out $4,000 a day in keeping names protected. They have $4,000 a day that they have to give to the United States government in fines for not disclosing information on people that they have in who are alleged to be rapists. And they have a lot of things in place that protect those people. One of those is the 2-witness rule. The other one is the massive amounts of money that the Watchtower Society gives in order to prevent them from leaving.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm well aware that there are problems in the Jehovah's Witness too. And by the way, I'm just as much against them as well. Okay, but they're not in the news as much right now, so it is not a matter of why are you singling out, the Catholic Church. That's because what you're hearing every single day, and you have to pick your battles. I don't know that much about JW, but I'm still very much against what's been going on with them too, and I would be like, walk out from them as well.
Like I
Yeah,
would honestly
Telltale
say,
Atheist is the J-Dub expert.
yep,
Yeah.
Telltale, Lloyd Evans, and
Lloyd Evans, those guys really know their shit.
right.
I would say though, I think Imam Tawhidi said it best here, and I think Steve knows exactly where I'm going for. Imam Tawhidi, and granted, this is a Muslim imam who's doing everything in his power to reform.
He's one of those non-Muslim imams.
He's
He's not one of those guys.
They're not one of them. They're rare though. You don't find too many of them.
Hare Krishna imams running around.
Well, he's an imam who's been doing everything in his power to reform the Islamic faith.
It's like those Jewish popes. You just they're.
But one of the things that he said was that you don't go into a cancer ward and say, stop doing this research. What about AIDS?
It's the same principle. It really is the same principle. I mean, like, let me ask you this, Prague. Would you go ahead, Ned? By the way, welcome, Ned. Ned is an Asgardian. Yeah. He's not a citizen of the planet. He actually is a citizen of outer space. How do you like that?
I'm a citizen of a country. I ain't no citizen of no planet.
I'm not kidding.
Globalist shit.
Rex, I'm not kidding. He is a citizen Asgardia, and that is outer space.
Yeah. Technically, I'm a dual citizen, but yeah.
You can't have dual citizenship. I thought you had to give up your original origin.
No, he means you have to duel to be a citizen.
Oh.
It's like a trial by combat thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ned, Mr. Asgardian.
But, yeah. Basically, isn't there that whole conspiracy theory that AIDS is fake, that cancer is fake, and all that other kind of stuff?
In the Catholic Church?
Catholics don't think that.
No, it's like we're not into that, anti-vax, flat Earth kind of crap. That ain't us.
Wrong church.
Okay, wrong church.
But
wrong denomination.
yeah. You're thinking flat earthers. They're into everything. So but let's talk about the JW for a second. So Prague, let's say Cyrus was a JW. Would you not be recommending to him get out of JW? This was going on in that church, which it is, by the way. I mean, do you understand that we're recommending to people to leave the Catholic Church for the same reasons you would recommend people leaving the JW Church? Same thing. Forget ideological concerns aside. Forget your theological positions. Put your religious beliefs aside. Don't you think if there's a morally just God, he is going to look at you and go, you're doing the best thing for the children first? Should we not place our children first? And I know
Okay.
I'm putting you in the spot, but you're the only RPR that decided to come in here. So
No,
props to
okay.
you, by the way.
So, so this is what I would say. Obviously, yes, we put the children first, but what I would say is you don't help something by running away from it. You help something by sticking it through and trying to fix it yourself.
They've done
I think
that. They've done that. It failed. It failed, Brad. Come on.
It's been failing.
No. There was I would posit to you that there really hasn't been, even for, Benedict was this different type of pope, and whether or not he knew about it, that is still debated. But there was never really, there hasn't ever been a really serious implementation at change put into the church, and so I can't say there's ever been an honest attempt to try and sort of
Why do they
stem
need
the
one?
abuse.
Why did they even? How did a
But there should be.
allow
That's
this
what
to
I'm
happen?
agreeing with you. There should be.
Hold on. That's okay. ISIS doesn't need to be abolished. It just needs to be reformed.
Kind of the same. That's a good comparison if you think about it. I mean,
Well,
think about it. You're dealing with a systemically corrupt organization at this point. Mike, go ahead, Max. Do a mic check. Max.
Hello. How
Yeah.
do I sound?
Yeah, you're fine.
You're a little quiet.
Sound like shit.
A little quiet.
No.
That's his voice, Rags. You can't do much about it. That's genetics, dude. Come on.
Hold on. I'm closer now. I have to be really.
Rags is so harsh on people.
Yeah.
I'm rough.
He is rough.
Ruff, ruff.
Whee!
Do I sound
Hey,
better
go
if
get
I-
your friend in here. Go get Ian. I miss him. I want to talk to him.
You can
my
message him
mic-
on Twitter.
Twitter.
You got him right.
Yeah, of course I do.
Yeah.
I'm
I say, Rags called you a fag. Get in here, please.
Faggot.
Steve. Guess what?
Yeah.
I'm on a tablet.
Awesome.
A stone tablet? That would be impressive.
Are you jealous, Steve?
I'm
I am.
managing the internet on a stone tablet.
So now I have a working front-facing camera.
Nice.
But you can't look at me. I'm dumb or ugly, whichever one. Anyway,
I don't. Does Ian check his DMs? I can't tell. He doesn't have the check feature on. So
I don't know.
I don't know.
I assume he does on
Oh, yeah, anyway.
occasion.
do I sound good?
Well, next time you wake up to him in the morning, and just whisper in his ear. Ask him.
Okay.
Check your DMs.
Check your DMs. I'll tweet him just in
Was-
case.
Did we want to read something I had found, or
Go for it.
Is there
Just
another
don't play-
Yeah, go ahead.
Trevor, just don't play any music, please. Whoever that is.
copyright strikes today, please?
Please, yeah, I don't want to be Pimp Monk in more ways than one. Sorry, Pimp. By the way, that's some messed up shit people that YouTube did to Pimp Monk. I know we're going to be going down a rabbit hole real quick at Side Trail, but do you guys just channel back after 3 freaking months, like for 4 days or something, they give him another strike
Oof.
for another 3 months? How crappy is that?
I think that, yeah, like the Christian church, it's fundamentally broken at this stage.
Ah.
I
Was
wouldn't
there?
say it's broken? It's just fragmented into what, 12,000 pieces?
Unfortunately.
Back on topic. So where were we? You were saying Prague?
Okay, so I think to compare the church to ISIS is very misleading, because I don't think that the church certainly doesn't have the mission of destroying some sort of culture or destroying something in order to conquer the world through violent conquest. That's not really the church's MO, although it has been used at times.
I'm
Jews
quite
parting the
sure
Red
that argue
Sea?
that neither is theirs.
Hang on, Ned.
What? Sorry, Sirs, what did you say?
I was saying that I've actually talked to a Muslim who desperately wanted to join ISIS, and he would argue that that's not what their goal is either, even though you and I would both agree that's what has been demonstrated.
Okay, well, can you again? Is it comparable to say that the church is like ISIS in this? Like, is the demonstration? Is it there? Are they comparable in terms of what they've done and like what they've the harm they've done to society in any age? Well, ISIS only existed for now, but I guess take the whole church versus the whole history of ISIS. Are the two have equal amounts of damage been done? Would you say?
Well, there was that whole phase about burning books and anti-science and everything.
And those neat crusades that everybody talks
I'd
about.
say the Crusades were an issue. I would agree that the first Crusades were maybe a little more justified than the subsequent ones, but you still have that. You still have the Inquisitions. I know that they're like the most.
All crusades are just.
Yeah,
Rex-
they're
I like him already.
my, my point being, though, is not saying that they're equally comparable. My point is saying that I would say that there's an issue from the top down with ISIS. And I would say that with the Catholic Church, with the fact that Francis has neglected to do things about what has been going on. He knew that they were there even before he became Pope. When he became Pope, he was still doing the same things, moving people to freaking Chile. I would argue that in both situations, you have a problem from the top down, and that problem has not been fixed by removing the person from the top and replacing it with somebody else. It hasn't been
Hashtag pedophile pope.
pedopope. But my point is not saying that, the Catholic Church has done an equal amount of murder as ISIS have. We probably could get a historian in here who could argue whether or not that is the case, but I can't argue whether or not that's the case. What I can argue is that the issue from the top down is there in both cases, and I would say that they're comparable in that.
No, okay, so I see what you're saying now. And how I would respond is by saying that the mission of the church, just because this Pope has been replaced and unfortunately the harms have continued, isn't comparable to ISIS because, of course, their mission is to continue to do harm. Whereas the harm is the unfortunate, effect of popes continuing to sort of brush things aside. It's not. It's a difference of, and not only intent, but a difference of what would you call it? I can't think of the word of it for it right now. It's a difference of it's
intensity.
What is intent? What is intent? I mean, it's moral. It's your mission statement. I mean, the ISIS mission statement is a little bit different, I think, than obviously the Catholic Church. But hypothetically, and I like my hypotheticals, if you found out that this was part of the Catholic thing from the beginning, that this is one of the reasons that the whole church has been the way it is because they want to foster the ability to harm children. How would that change your position?
I don't just repeat the last bit of that because I'm not sure I quite understood that.
If they're okay, like I've said, I believe very strongly there has to be some kind of mechanistic thing in a organization this large to allow to have this amount of abuse without it becoming public earlier and so large a scale, right? I think there has to be systems in place, checks and balances, where they know exactly what's going on. They move priests around. There's a whole just systematic functioning machine that protects these priests. And let's say you found out that was because the whole institution is dedicated to be able to do these things without consequence.
The whole institution would be dedicated to that purpose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If I found, my opinion on the body of the church is in the people who make up of it would change certainly, and I'd start to, I don't know, at that point I might consider becoming a priest to just try to clean up what's been going on there so I can get my say in and try to actually fix it. But again, this is sort of the conversation we had in the after show where I think those who make up the church and what the church is are different substances, speaking in terms of the spiritual embodiment of it.
Yeah, I know. I get the theological position of the church is separate from the people, but honestly, this church here on earth, whatever you may think religiously, it's made up by the people. Just like an organization is, even though it's a separate entity, right? A corporation is actually a legal entity in and of itself, but it has no real ontological existence. It's just a name. But the people make up that organization. And if the people are corrupt, if the board of directors is corrupt, the CEO is corrupt, the chief financial officer is corrupt, the whole damn system is corrupt, that organization is corrupt. Just because it is a separate organization on paper that is no different than Ken Hovind trying to use the excuse that his name in capital letters is not the Ken Hovind that he is, or sovereign citizen approach, is no different and an invalid argument, in my opinion.
Okay, well then I think we're going to have to end up agreeing to disagreeing there because it is something that we'd have to get into in terms of metaphysical type dealios. In that, if I say the church is something more than her members, than this people, it's going to have to be that discussion because again, I think I think you could wash out the entire corruption of it and replace it with people who actually have good intent. Now, one of the things I will say is that the church, being at least somewhat similar to those organizations you've talked about, if not very analogous, is that there are structures where people have power. And one of the things we know about people in power is that the power corrupts them. It's not. It's a pretty fair constant to say that any amount of power corrupts. And of course, this isn't an excuse for doing evil, but so long as you have systems where people have authority over each other, there's always going to be a chance of abuse. And the best you can hope to do is catch it and stop it from perpetuating. Has the church been good in that over the past decades? Obviously not. And I think that can be, but I think it can be fixed. Like, I think the idea that, to use the corporation analogy again, that, you couldn't wash out the board of directors or the CFO and the CEO from Walmart and you just have to scrap the whole thing because the guys on the top were bad. I think that's sort of ridiculous and over the top, and you're doing a lot more harm that way because now you just sent a whole bunch of people into unemployment over the actions of a few dicks at the top. I don't think that's very just.
But Walmart is a legitimate organization that hires people. A church is not something that is a nonprofit organization. Okay, a nonprofit organization doesn't have the same safeguards as necessary for those exact same reasons, right? The reason why we can replace a whole board and the CEO and COO and CFO is because those people that work for that company rely on that company to make a living. That doesn't matter in a nonprofit organization.
Well, I would say it does, because a nonprofit doesn't just mean, just because people aren't working on. Well, first off, some people do work with the church to make a living through its various charities and various other organizations that
they keep the charities, separate them.
Well, you can't. The church
regulate it. Just separate them. The hell you can't. Why couldn't you?
It's not that you can't. Well, partially you can't because these organizations receive funding from the church. It's not just that these entities are charities unto themselves. They receive their funding from the church, which gets the donations at mass or through other organizations, things like that. And so, something like a St. Jude's Hospital would lose a substantial portion of its funding because of how, because of its ties to the Catholic Church. If the Catholic Church were to, if you were to Thanos it and poof, there goes the Catholic Church, St. Jude's Hospital wouldn't be too far behind.
There is enough money in the Catholic Church that if dissolved, it would have enough money to keep St. Jude's going for a very, very long time.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, but of course you can't just have make one big ass hunkin' one-time donation and then expect that to be good. You need a consistent source of revenue, and I don't know if.
But they will find other revenues. You're actually trying to say, well, I know this organization does all these horrific things, but we got to keep it going for all the good.
I'm not just trying to say that. Again, it's a different. I hate the corporation analogy because a church isn't a corporation. It's much more important than a corporation. Although I know you'll disagree with that.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yes, but
especially not this particular church. I think this is it's just corrupt and evil from inside and out. I see nothing moral about it. I see nothing spiritual about it. I see nothing holy about it. I see nothing of God of any kind in any of this. I really don't.
This time it'll be different. This time things will change. This time we'll fix it.
Well, if you don't have that attitude and you just have it stuck in the mud, then yeah, nothing will change. But you can change it. Change isn't impossible.
If you dismantle it, there won't be a problem either.
That's what I think.
If you dismantle it and then you have, charities, hospitals, all this crap going out of business. But forget that. You have a bunch of people who are spiritually wandering now because you've just destroyed the moral and cultural fabric of communities and people.
Let them wander spiritually.
That's what I want.
Far greater than charities.
Let them wander as long as it takes.
Yeah, that's what I want. I don't want them to get their morals from this kind of system. I want
their morals from the people. They're getting their morals from what the people are saying, the objective system that those people, as evil as they may be, represent. Like, this is why the separation of the church and its members is so important.
I mean, listen to what you're saying, dude.
Are you hearing yourself?
Yeah, no. See, this is why the separation of the people who make up the church and the church herself is so important. Because the church, and this is also why the objective morality thing is so important, because the objective morals which the church is championing are separate from the fallible beings who are trying to propagate that objective.
Honestly, if the objective
the morals are beyond the individuals themselves.
If the moral structure or fabric includes raping children, then it needs to be
okay, but it
down.
Doesn't. But it doesn't. These people are evil, and every Catholic who has found out about it has condemned this action. Like, it very obviously does.
No, they haven't.
That's the problem.
That is completely wrong, dude.
That's the whole problem is that they haven't.
I mean, other than the people who are involved in it and are covering it up, who are getting the condemnation, everybody who isn't involved in it is condemning it.
No, they're condemning the action, right? I've never had anybody say, well, abuse of children is good, except this one guy I'm questioning. I don't know. He's kind of creepy, but for the most part, I don't think anybody's saying that. That's not that's not the point. The point is you're funding an organization that allows for this, and they've gone past the time they can self-police. And I'm telling you, dude, if you were just to take yourself to a little bit higher vantage point and look down and forget about the ideology and think to yourself very hard, what is the right moral action to do? If I didn't have these moral precepts of what I've been indoctrinated about, what is the right moral action? And if I get that moral action wrong, what will God do? Do you think a fair God would look at you and say, you're trying to protect your children and I'm going to judge you for that by you leaving the church? That is not a just God, dude.
Well, first off, the analogy I was originally trying to mention was something more along the lines of, take Syria, for example, and all the people who have fled Syria because of the civil war. One of the big condemnations of that, and one of the ones I agree with, is that those battle-aged men, rather than trying to fix their embattled country, are instead fleeing and leaving it to various factions to fight over and mull over, instead of fighting for the faction that happens to uphold the principles they believe. And the same can be done with the church. It isn't a matter of, you don't have, first off, if it's not, we've established that it's not happening in every parish. Before Suris left, he said there were so many thousands victims, and then, pointed out there were 17,000 dioceses, and left out the fact that dioceses can contain millions upon millions of members sometimes. And so if it's only happening a select few dioceses, you don't have to pull your children out of the church to protect them. You can Well, you can go to another diocese. That's another point I tried to make on stream, where it was like, you can you can go to different dioceses. You can go to independent Catholic churches, which I didn't realize was a thing, and that's a great option as well. Yeah. And you can you can choose to deprive the bishops of these dioceses that are corrupt of the money and of the resources, and have their parishes with her, while still supporting the people who are doing it right within that organization. It doesn't need to be universal condemnation. Say that again. Sorry.
How do you find out which ones are corrupt without them having?
You spin the wheel and take your chances. It's like Russian roulette.
Well, yeah, and I would say that even one case is worth pulling your children out for.
I don't know about that.
Is one case of like sexual harassment or like actual rape at Walmart?
I'm not going to say it. I don't want to confuse isolated instances with systemic. Okay. There's a huge difference.
Well, let's talk about the systemic real quick, because I never got the chance to read this thing I pulled up before.
By the way, you want to get some friends in here? I feel like we're beating up on you. No, really. I mean, I gotta admit, like I said, I disagree with you vehemently, but you at least have the balls to actually carry on a conversation, and I'll give you that. But your other friends, man, I'm telling you, what a bunch of wussies.
I don't know if I would. I don't know if any of them would be around to come on. Also, they're not fucking. Unfortunately, none of them are exactly the greatest public speakers, so I'm not sure how much they would help. But let me just read this real quick, because I think this is important to the whole, endemicness and the whole systematic thing that you guys are talking about. And so, according to Dr. Thomas Plant of Stanford University and Santa Clara University, available research suggests that approximately 2 to 5% of priests have had a sexual experience with a minor, which is lower than the general adult male population, in which the percentage of those who have interfered with minors is best estimated to be closer to 8%. In other words, children who have anything to do with priests are between 1.6 to 4 times less likely to be abused by them than by anyone else. So that's the finding from this Dr. Plant. And so...
Wait, so, okay, run that last part against, it's 4 times less likely.
1.6 to 4 times less likely that if you were involved with priests, then, let me just read the last sentence.
As compared to what?
The general public. In other words, children who have anything to do with priests are between 1.6 to 4 times less likely to be abused by them than by anyone else.
So that they're basically saying it's safer to take your children to a diocese than it is anywhere else. I think
not anywhere else, not any other institution. They're just saying then the general public.
The general public. I get that. I think that's horseshit. I don't know where the hell that number comes from.
Is the general public wielding the same power as the Pope?
It depends who you're talking about in the general public.
How about,
I mean,
how about for other churches, though? How about, let's do a comparison. Like, for example, a Jewish synagogue. I'm sorry, I don't hear a lot of these stories coming out of Jewish synagogues.
Well, I don't happen to have the numbers on Jewish synagogue or other Protestant churches.
Go join a Jewish synagogue then.
Well, hold on. What I have heard, and obviously, again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but one of the things that you have in other Protestant congregations is the fact that ministers there can actually marry, members of their congregation, marry someone else, and just kind of go around being less than a good minister with the rest of their congregation. And what's actually happened because of that opportunity, I've heard, again, numbers may dispute this, I have yet to see, but it would make sense to me that because there's this openness within these Protestant churches to be more sort of sexually explicit with your congregation, especially if you're a minister who wants to marry, that's actually resulted in more abuse cases than within the Catholic Church. And I believe it's higher even still amongst Jewish synagogues. And
so you're saying that they let priests marry, it'll actually make things worse?
Yeah, well, the whole priest
Really?
marrying thing as a solution to this is
it's not a
completely-
it's not a solution. Don't even think that there's only one solution to this problem. It is getting rid of the church.
Exterminatus.
Absolutely.
That's the only way this is going to be resolved. I guarantee there's going to be another couple hundred years of these things going on, and nothing's going to be done because 300 years ago people probably had these conversations and nothing got done.
Yeah, but next time we'll get it right.
Yeah, Nick.
Oh,
it's some other alternate reality. We'll get it right. No, enough. I mean, it's simply enough. I'm tired of it. I'm simply tired of it. I do think, especially if you're a parent and you have children, go to somewhere else. Right? I'm
Well,
not
hold on, you
advocating
have-
go be religious. Just find somewhere else to go. Take your
Hold
kids.
on.
At least
You wanna-
daycare workers actually have a working with children check.
I mean, if you want to go, okay.
Well,
it's still
we
bad.
could talk about the abuse rate in schools if you want to, because that was a topic of contention as well when I brought it up last time on the stream, because it is certainly
They don't cover it up. They don't
They don't
They
cover it up.
absolutely
There's been like
do.
one case.
Oh, no, they don't. No,
they
they don't.
absolutely do.
No, there's like
No,
one.
no.
There's
It's
like
not. Hold on. It's not the explicit. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
There's
I'll
like
listen.
one district in New York. They had a couple hundred cases over a long period of time in one district. Okay, but there's isolated. Again, don't confuse isolated with systemic.
Well, no. Well, hold on now. The numbers I brought up last time when I pulled up this other article was that around 9% of children who go through the public high school system are sexually abused. That's numbers in the millions compared to thousands within the Catholic Church. That is far more systemic than the Catholic Church in terms of just raw numbers alone.
I don't know where you're
What
getting.
about
Systemic doesn't mean raw numbers.
Yeah, I don't know where. I think there's a lot of some manipulations going on. I know a lot of people that went through high school. A lot of people. Nobody had a problem, and yet half the towns had a problem.
Yeah, every 9 out of 10 people you're going to talk to is still not going to have had that experience because it's really essentially 1 out of every 10. But when you're talking about the size of the public school high school system across the country, it just ends up being far more people. And I understand that a collusion,
But
there's
the
collusion
church-
going.
this is what bugs me.
Oh,
I have a question. When you said that, there's a little verbal thing that happened that I want to point out to everybody, and hopefully you can suss this out for me, Pragmatic.
Okay.
And this is not me trying to jump on you. This is me trying to suss something out.
No, I get it. You're very friendly to me, so thank you.
I don't think I've actually been like really angry at anybody before.
I mean,
I gotta use that all day long. These are people on Twitter. Steve, you're such an angry man. You hate God. It's like, fuck.
Oh,
Steve,
I've
that's just
not heard him angry.
Oh
trust
my
me.
God! It's like really. I was
Steve,
like this.
you're only angry because Alex Jones doesn't want you watching trap porn.
Oh, that's. Oh, fuck Alex Jones.
But anyway, so
It's not gay.
No, yeah,
hey,
it's
we
actually-
agree.
It is. It is. It's a little gay. But go ahead.
Okay, we have a fight now. Anyway, so essentially 1 out of 10 children who go through the high school system are sexually abused. That is the statement you made, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what about that statement implies that these children were sexually abused by their teachers?
No, the number is, I should clarify, you're right. It is sexually abused specifically by teachers. That is the stat, not just sexually abused in general. When you talk about sexual abuse in general, it actually gets bumped up a little bit more, and it depends on
So-
rates of reporting, but it is specifically by teachers
So-
with the 9%
so
number.
I want to make sure that we also talk about proportionality here. Many of the cases in the church involved very disgusting. I mean, it's rape. Okay, so
Mhm.
are they using a fair analysis to say, okay, we're talking about rape, we're talking about inappropriate contact of some kind?
Yeah, no. It's not just inappropriate contact, like, oh, like Mr. Larson tried to give me like an awkward hug, and I think he grabbed my butt or something like that. No, it's like
I do that all the time. So I don't want to get accused of rape because that happens.
yeah. No. It's not that at all. It's actual, like, physical, like, you're like either held down and, like, tongue stuck down throat,
I'm
something
just
like
not
that.
buying this, man. I'm just not buying it. I'm sorry.
I
What's
could.
your citation for this?
Well, that the 9% number is a different source. Hold on, let me grab.
Yeah, I'd love to read it. I'm not denying that number's true, but I would like to read the source itself, because what I've found sometimes is, especially like the thing that I pointed out with the way that your verbiage was being used, is it wasn't incredibly specific, and a lot of times when you have articles about issues like this, sometimes if there's an agenda to be had, and I'm not saying that you have a particular agenda here, but sometimes if there's an agenda to be had, imprecise language will be used, because then they're expecting the reader to make the mental connections for them, so that what they're saying is not an outright lie, but at the same time it's an untruth via omission. Sometimes that happens when you have papers like this. I'm not saying that's the case, because I haven't had a chance to read your paper, and I want to read it to see if that is the case.
Yeah, hold on. I'm trying.
Well, it's a paper, a study. What is it? Do you think?
It's a meta study, so it's like 100 and something pages. But I can direct you to the page I'm looking at here. I'll post it in the chat.
But even if that is the case, thank you, God of Silence. He's God of Silence super chat $5. He says, if God wants the Catholic Church to survive, then let him fund it. Stop supporting child abuse. Put your money where your mouth is. I agree. Look, if there's some kind of religious things that's going on here, the church will survive because God wants it to. Okay, but you don't need to be a part of that.
God, hold on. We can't. It's not as though God himself is going to come down and start mass-producing gold to fill the coffers.
Why not? He's God.
Why not?
He's God.
He's
He
gone.
is literally omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent. He would
He can
let
do it
the
if he
church
wants.
survive.
If you wanted to, hold on. No, this is getting into another discussion on the nature of God and how, if he were to just appear in the sky and say, "Hey, I exist," that would be a massive
Amazing.
It would be amazing, but
That
That
would
would
it would
be-
also
that
take
would-
away
that
our
would
free
be
will
the
to
most
believe in him.
amazing thing
You
he
know-
could do.
You know what I noticed, Prague? Everything you know about God, somebody told you, or you just figured out. You have not discovered a single thing about God that you can actually say, this is actually what we can demonstrate to be the
Well,
case.
no, it's
Not to actually demonstrate God. I'm just talking about property-wise, right? So you don't know what God wants when it comes to this church. You have no idea if he's saying, I'm testing you. I'm saying, are you a moral person? What should you do? I left my church because of moral reasons. So I'm not even being a hypocrite on this. I literally left my church because
that's fine if you felt you had to do that for whatever reasons. I'm not chastising you for that. I'm just saying that, being that, God doesn't simply manifest himself, because nowadays it has to do with the fact that God works through people. He works through his flock. And so it has to be, if we're not the ones who are trying to fix the church, then it's not going to get fixed.
How do you know he's not saying, hey, Prague, I want to know if you morally will do the right thing or not? Because I'm telling you right now, I don't think you're doing the morally the right thing.
And I've pulled up this report that's been leaked, and I note the date of June 2004. 14 years old.
Wow.
There was the first Catholic abuse scandal back in 2002. So it's
not the first recorded one.
Well, the first big one, the Boston Globe one, that broke out. So it's certainly not as though, it's been, and it's certainly not as though it's not in lieu of some major scandal or anything like that. But even so, what's your reasoning for believing it's changed? Like, why would the rate have suddenly dropped off in those 14 years ago?
Well, simply because once it's pointed out, education system is not the Catholic Church, so they take steps to fix that shit.
Yeah, you don't think some of this stuff has been resolved and addressed over a period of the last 10 years, 14 years? When was this?
This is 2004. I don't.
Okay, so 14 years.
I don't know. I don't know if it has been. Of course,
Well,
weather measures
how
are
much has
not.
been what measures have been done in the Catholic Church? How much has been done? Nothing.
Unfortunately, but look, I don't think. Look,
Admit that.
if you
That's
can,
a big
I don't
but.
know how popular this study
big
is.
but.
I don't know how widely it was passed around. So for all we know, this could be an incredibly obscure paper that people ignored and tried to sweep under the rug precisely because they didn't want to do anything in the first place. So I don't, there's nothing there's no, unless, again, I open it up,
All this,
find other literature. It's
I get
fine.
this. By looking at this, like you said, this does look like a metadata there. It's looked like an aggregate of news articles that was taken from the news, literally, and then made a determination of things based upon those news reports, because they have a summary of all the news reports at the very end.
Yes. Okay.
Right. So, I mean, this obviously is an aggregate of data, but I'm trying to look at like any kind of specificity here.
Well, obviously, I think some of it is reliant on the fact that you go into these you go to these sources and you'll see that there's been some sort of investigation done by.
Okay, hang on. This is why I asked this question, because I don't know if you read this whole thing, but I'm reading it now, or not obviously the whole thing. Can I? Who's got the background noise? Can you mute real quick? Okay, I want everybody to hear this very clearly. Okay, thank you. Here's what they determined to be abuse, and I'm going to read this. So,
what page are you on, just so I can see?
It is page 17.
17.
The question asked students was, during your whole school life, how often, if at all, has anyone, this includes students, teachers, other school employees, or anyone else, done the following things to you when you did not want them to? Made sexual comments, jokes, gestures, or looks, gave or left you sexual pictures, photograph or illustrations, messages or notes, wrote sexual messages, graffiti about you on the bathroom walls and locker rooms, spread sexual rumors about you, said you were gay or lesbian, spied on you as you dressed or showered at school, flashed or mooned you, touched, grabbed, pinched you in a sexual way, intentionally brushed up against you in a sexual way, pulled at your clothing in a sexual way, pull off your clothing, blocked you in any way, cornered you in a sexual way, forced you to kiss him or her, forced you to do something sexual other than kissing. Not well, except for maybe the last.
That is really broad.
That is
okay.
Just saying that you were.
No. I see what you're saying, and I understand
nothing,
that.
Nothing compared to what's gone on in the church. Not even remotely. This is even whataboutism. This is way the fuck different.
Well, okay, hold on. If you go down, I see what you're saying, but if you go
gay
to
all the goddamn time, okay?
No, hold on. Allow me to explain it. If you go down to page 20 and you look at the table there, you see it's broken. It gets broken down by contact and non-contact. So if you want to look at, so you can go down to it's at the bottom of the page 20. And there, the numbers sort of vary because it's not just citing news articles. It does have some other papers.
Yeah, no, I get that, but it says like unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, etc., etc., etc. This is not a systemic thing. We know these things do happen. Isn't
a common schoolyard prank pantsing somebody?
Yeah, that would that's harassment nowadays.
This is related specifically to teachers, not just.
This table is strictly for authorities.
Yeah, there is one for authorities. I see that. Contact, non-contact, all misconduct. Godless Highway, another $5. Thank you, Godless Highway. He thinks I'm actually doing a good job tonight. That means a lot from you, Godless Highway, and Miss Snarky. If God uses men, then a good God wouldn't want you supporting a church that built an infrastructure around hiding abuse. God magically paid Jesus' tax. And again, I honestly think that if you're putting ideological concerns and considerations of head of safety, there's a problem there. I don't think any church is true that you have to do that. I don't think God should put you in that kind of moral position where you have to say, I have to believe in this church. I have to give money to this church, even though there's so many problems with it. I don't think a rational God would do that.
Okay, well then, I understand.
Work with me here, pragmatic. Come on, do you fault me for that?
No, I don't. But I think to say I think this is sort of one of the misunderstandings is because when you say, step above ideological considerations, it kind of comes to like, well, this isn't pure, it is ideology, but it's an ideology of this is the supreme being who created
that you
everything.
think so. That you think so. That's it. That's all. Look at the Godless Highway was a
Well, he was
hold
a
on.
pastor for
He was
years.
a pastor for years. He finally said, "You know what?
I
I can't do this any longer."
no offense to the Godless Iowan, because I've had discussions with him on
nice.
Twitter,
He's one of my favorite.
but
I almost like him more than Cirrus. I do like him more.
To be fair, you should like almost everybody more than me.
Yeah, that's true. Fair point.
what should we call it? It's not just it's Protestant theology and philosophy, which was what he was raised in, is quite backwards. Like the thing we talk about to prove God, like we talk about Thomas Aquinas and things. Like I'm only addressing this because this is kind of where the
I know. I'm gonna let you. I mean, like I said, you're consistently wrong, but you're not like. I've seen a lot worse apologetics. Trust me. Okay. So go for it.
Yeah, this comes back to what Protestantism has kind of done, and this is the reason you kind of get a lot of deconversions from certain Protestant sects, is because they put theology before philosophy. And what that ends up doing is that you have sort of a lot of, something's whatever the Bible says is right. And, there's no outside sources. Like you have things like sola scriptura and sola fide and things along that line. And then they apply that to philosophy and say, all right, well, this is how we reason out things based on what the Bible says. When in reality, theology is supposed to be on the top of the pyramid after you do a lot of rigorous philosophy to get to it. Like what Plato and Aristotle did in different fashions, mind you, was they both used various forms of their own reasoning and their own systems to come to the conclusions that there is one God. And St. Thomas he's sort of the synthesis of both of them in a sense. A lot of people credit him with being a little bit more Aristotelian, but he's really sort of a synthesis of both. And that's how you get the 5 proofs. Yeah. And so it's sort of, obviously.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Please finish.
Yeah, well, it's not just a matter of you mentioned before, like, we're taking all of this based on things that people have told us and we haven't discovered anything for ourselves. But, logic and philosophy is a form of discovery. Like, you don't just discover things through, the hard sciences, obviously. Philosophy is just as valid a tool for sussing out what is real and what isn't as the hard science is. Science is.
I don't know about that.
If not, I would argue more so, because I'd argue it's more pertinent to our living than the sciences. But
I know. I think that's backwards.
I knew I would get some people.
I mean, I'm the first person to advocate the validity of philosophy. I think it's critical people learn philosophy in some ways, but I think science is equally important, in some ways even more so. But I think that without philosophy, science would be basically useless. But Godless Sign went for another $10. Thank you. He says, "This is just for you, Steve. What you're doing here is amazing. Also, yes, Protestantism is really backwards. We actually prosecute ministers who commit sex crimes." Ooh, ouch.
Oh.
Supposedly.
Shots across the bow on that one.
Yeah, supposedly.
I mean, but Prag, I mean, do you think that anything I've said is incoherent, irrational, or because I'm getting like on the Twitter stuff, the red pill religion people saying that my positions are just not rational, and then when I'm asking them, well, what is irrational about my position to be against a church that's allowed these things to happen? What is irrational about that? Now you can take the position, okay, this is God's divine church. I get that, but let's take that out of the equation. Completely out of the equation. Just indulge me. Have I done anything on Twitter? Have I said any position? Have I talked about morality in any way that is incoherent or irrational?
I would not say so, no. But the problem, again, is always when you talk about abolishing the church, because the church can't be... This is the problem, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. Like, it's impossible sometimes, or so they say, to talk to you guys, because you can't separate the spiritual element, the theology, the ideology, the ideology, if you like, from what the church is, because that's
we can, because we don't believe the church is true.
Well, of course you guys can.
I mean, I don't have to be an atheist to know that the Catholic Church is just wrong. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Well, I mean, you can find other branches of Christianity that claim that, but they're the ones that are wrong.
But I used to be Catholic. I left that shit.
Yeah. I mean, they're not.
I'd be
they're
interested,
not
I'd
as
be
wrong
interested
as,
in
like,
hearing
younger-
about some deconversion stories from like people like you, Rags.
Yeah.
I'd be
Oh, it's
interested
pretty
to
simple.
hear.
None of it could be proven, and there was no evidence for it. So I was like, "Fuck this shit."
Oh, wow.
Well, what made you believe in the first place, Rags?
Oh, I was born into it.
Bad excuse. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I was basically brainwashed. Like all the young people who are brought up in the churches typically are.
I mean,
Now-
hell, I was a young Earth creationist for years.
Oh yeah, man. You're told that for all time and always in eternity, and that's all you hear. And you are told bad
Yes.
reasons for it all the time for justification.
And you're
Yes.
told if you leave it,
teaching
you're
teaching your
screwed, right?
children your moral systems is equivalent to brainwashing. Yes.
In some ways, but I mean, okay, Brian, you were raised in a Parag, or did you convert?
Me? Oh, yes. I was born into it,
Okay,
and I
okay.
was.
So let me try to bring it back a little bit. Look at me. Let's talk about me for a second, because about me. So
Sure.
let's say that Cyrus never left younger creationism. Now he's trying to convince me that younger creationism is true, and he tells me, "Hey, Steve, you don't believe this. God's gonna send you to the hell for eternity. You're Catholic," and you say, "Hey, Steve, you got to listen to me. If not, God's going to send you to hell for eternity." I've actually had people literally today on Twitter tell me I'm going to hell for the things I've been saying today because I'm lying about the church. Even though I've asked them, what the hell have I lied about? They've returned with absolutely nothing. And I've also explained to them, if I put out information that is wrong, please correct it. But that doesn't mean I'm lying, because I honestly do believe this. Right. And by the way, they haven't corrected me on shit, by the way, but that's not a lie. They don't understand what a lie means. I honestly believe that the Catholic Church is a force of evil in the world on multiple different levels. Okay. That's not a lie. But for somebody to say, "Oh, hey, Steve, you're lying about that. God's going to condemn you for that." Well, what is the difference between that and Sir saying, "Steve, God's going to condemn you if you don't believe the earth is 6,000 years old"?
Well, first off, I'd like to clarify something that I don't. Catholics who are overzealous with saying, "Oh, you're going to hell," are wrong, because there's a lot of ways you can get into heaven and still not be a Catholic.
I don't know if they're Catholic. I can't say they were Catholic.
But in general, I mean, besides the fact that people I know some people do make the argument, but that's wrong. You don't just go to hell for simply not believing or being a member of the wrong church or whatever. But I mean, I guess the difference would be that as Catholics, you're not supposed to make that argument in the first place, because that's a wrong argument, I would say. So, because
you didn't make that argument. I love Jade. I love Jade to death. She was a Catholic, but she never said you have to be Catholic to believe Catholic and to be saved.
Yeah,
that's completely correct.
Yeah, she said that there are ways of getting saved, and that everybody have an opportunity, either whenever. But she says that's up to God. Who is she to go around telling people who's saved and who's not? And I think that was an admirable position for her to take.
Yeah, no, of course. The question is always sort of like, what some Christians try to do through bad tactics is to sort of try to nudge people to live ordered lives as it is, so that it's easier for them to go to heaven, especially if like you're a close friend and they think that your soul is in danger. Like when they tell you something about your religion or try to like get you to live like the life they want, it's under, just to clarify, it's not them saying that you're wrong, you're going to burn in hell. It's them expressing a deep concern for you, because they're concerned about your immortal soul. And I think that's
No, they know. They hate me. Why the fuck do they give a shit about my mortal soul?
So I'd like to point out that I actually have a video. I actually have a video on my channel. If you'd like to watch it, feel free to. But it's actually called "Is Hell a Threat?" And the entire basis on the video, the entire purpose of the video, is to point out that when somebody is arguing that they're just trying to save you, it is never, even if it's unintentional, it is never without the underlying threat of hell. Because otherwise, what are you saving somebody from? If you want to disagree with it, that's fine. Again, I do have it's like 6 minutes long. It's a decently short video where I argue my case on it. But the point is, there is no way to say I'm concerned for you without the underlying threat being there in the first place to be concerned for.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, is jail a threat if you commit crimes?
That's a tangible threat that we know about. Yes.
Yes, it's actually a tangible threat. If you can demonstrate, and granted, I'm not an evidentialist, but if you can demonstrate to me that hell is a place that I will go, then we can have a conversation. But now you're going to have to convince me of a few things. One, you're going to have to convince me that hell is just, which is going to be incredibly hard to do in the first place.
That's going to be tough.
That's going to be really hard to do.
Really hard.
Never fits any mortal crime.
Yeah, I think. I think the example I actually gave, well, I mean, socks with Crocs, yeah, hell, you can do hell for that. That's fine. But I think the example I made in there was I said, okay, so let's take Hitler as an example. How many people did Hitler kill? How many lives did he snuff out? My opinion would be he should be tortured for the amount of time that he took away from those people. But that number is still not infinite.
Mm-hmm. No, okay. Well, do we really?
Well, I think it's probably a big topic.
It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning by me here, and I thought I wanted to go to. I wanted to wake up to go to the gym tomorrow. I could explain hell if you want me to right now, but I don't know if we're getting too off topic.
No, it's okay. I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't believe in a younger creationist hell, and I don't believe in a Catholic hell. And even Catholics, even the Catholics have said there's no. Even one of the who was it that said hell's made up? They mean the Catholics.
I heard that like a third of Catholics don't believe in hell.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate how poorly educated some of us are. I'll grant you.
Yeah,
it's hard to be educated on something where you're just kind of like pulling it out of your ass.
Yeah, especially because there's no evidence for it at all. Why would you?
Well, hold on. I got a question for Rags because I got some time ago you got into it with Mauritian Struggle, and I have to ask: do you
Who's Mauritian Struggle?
He's British YouTuber, atheist. He converted to Catholicism, and he got onto you about Descartes being a rationalist and things like that. Sort of, does that ring a bell?
No, it doesn't ring a bell at all.
All right, it was a tiny interaction. It was really only not even a huge thread. But my question to you is: do you consider philosophical proofs valid proofs?
I wouldn't know.
All right, well then,
I would.
That's the end of that conversation. That's fine then.
No, I would. I'm not an evidentialist either. I think that rationalism, if you're talking about Descartes or Leibniz or even Spinoza,
yeah, maybe. What do you mean by that exactly?
Any of them that posit a rational argument, I'll take as evidence. But I haven't found one that was actually convincing. Thomas Aquinas is, the Aquinas.
Yeah, I guess
they're not very convincing at all.
Yeah, I'll say that I might. I guess. Yeah.
Well,
they were years ago, maybe to people. When we know more now, I think those arguments were probably a lot more convincing 300 years ago than they ever would be today.
All right. Well, I'll ask. Again, to get into the 5 proofs would be another 3.5 hour long stream.
But to say, even Thomists who have been studying Thomism for 10 years still will admit that they don't truly understand Thomism. So I'll grant you that.
Nobody understands Thomism.
I don't.
Thomas didn't understand Thomism.
Okay, so I don't.
I got a PhD friend who doesn't understand Thomism.
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of Thomists not understanding Thomism. I'm sure there's certain elements they don't.
There are Catholics who don't understand Catholicism, so I don't know. That's huge stretch.
I would highly suggest a podcast called Pints with Aquinas. It's a very good series.
We got to get Dr. Rhodes in here. He's a Thomist.
Just a quick question to you, Steve. Did you pick up the God Delusion by Dawkins, and did you read his sort of?
I'm not a fan of Dawkins.
What?
I can't stand Dawkins.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Then you.
I can't stand the new atheist, except for Hitchens. I loved Hitchens, but the rest, not so much a fan.
Oh, Hitchens was the worst out of all of them.
Hitchens was the best.
Oh.
I like Hitchens.
Man, I hated the evidence that Hitchens brought to the table for people like Mother Teresa. That was so horrible. Oh, wait,
hold on. Are you saying Mother Teresa did something wrong, or are you saying that you presented a poor case against her?
Man, I'm just saying that if I have a choice between making somebody suffer for God or having somebody, actually get healed, I'm probably going to do everything in my power to heal.
All right.
This is not like a slide. I mean, this is not like made up stuff. I mean, there was some research involved in this. That she literally did think suffering made people become closer to God. Did she not?
Of course, but that's a Catholic tenet in general. That suffering of some kind
purifies
your soul. Let me explain to you what she was doing, because it wasn't. I saw the documentary, and it was just utter garbage. But because I was really annoyed at this, so I'll
Are you
just
sure
go
it
off
because
on
you have a horse in this race?
Yeah, but seriously, it's like this is the concept of just hospice care. It's people who have come to terms with the dying and who have kind of accepted their state and go to her so they can die in peace. They don't go to her so that they can try to get healed.
Is that why they withheld any kind of treatment or pain medication?
They actually denied treatment to people. That's not the same thing as hospice care.
That's not hospice care, dude.
You don't deny painkillers to somebody who's dying in hospice.
And pocket the money.
This is...
If you'd like to argue that, then by all means, but you're going to die on this hill.
No,
Badly.
this is okay. This is hospice care in a third world country. It's not going to be the same over
And-
here as it is over there.
Oh, okay.
And so-
I don't want to. I do not want to straw man you. But are you telling me that hospice care in a third world country means that they don't get medical treatment?
It means that they might not be able to afford it because of how expensive it is. Yeah, and
There was money
It's not
there.
about the individual people being able to afford it. It's about the
withheld it.
facility, which is funded by the Catholic Church,
They
which is one
withheld
of the
it.
best funded institutions in the world.
Yeah, they withheld treatment, just like it was. They put ideology ahead of, oh, don't wear condoms. Go out and have as many kids as you want over in Africa.
or just not have sex. Not that hard.
That doesn't work.
That
Study
doesn't work.
psychology.
This is Africans. They don't
Study
get-
some actual human psychology. Look,
No,
I love
yes,
philosophy
please,
and I
study
study
at
religion,
least
but
something.
study the human fucking mind.
This Huxleyite nonsense of like the Brave World, New World, where we all need
I
a
hate
partner.
that book.
It doesn't have to do with Huxley. It doesn't have.
I
I
read-
know
do
it
with
doesn't have to do
Darwin.
with Huxley,
It
but
doesn't have
feeds
to
into
do
this,
with any
like, Brave
goddamn
New
thought
delusion
leaders.
kind of
Look at a
thing.
goddamn study
Craig.
in human psychology,
Craig.
There's plenty of studies to prove the fact
and
that
they
abstinence
prove
is
you wrong.
Yeah, Cyrus is right. Prague, you are living in a world of delusion if you think that just advocating abstinence is going to you're going to go down to these people in Africa in these tribes and say, hey, don't have sex. It's not going to happen. It is not.
No.
Okay, so hang on. It is not going to fucking happen. So what is the way to prevent overcrowding, overpopulation, over farming, and depletion of the resources there? Why not give them condoms and allow them not to procreate so that it helps solve their own problems and prevent HIV and disease and everything? Why is your ideology more important than their health, their well-being, their safety? Why?
What makes you think that that you have any better of a chance of teaching them safe sex than I do about abstinence? Where's
Because
the
they-
evidence for that?
The actual evidence
Doesn't even
behind
work in
abstinence
our
only
country.
indication that, by the way, just 2 weeks ago, I did a live stream on where we did everything in our power to get somebody to try to defend the abstinence only argument, and none was forthcoming constantly.
I did not.
Yeah.
know
We
about this,
brought
but I
evidence and
happily
studies,
joined.
and nobody else brought shit.
Yeah.
Hey, if I had known, I would have happily joined.
I would have loved for you to have joined because we desperately wanted somebody to come on the opposing side.
Yes, absolutely. I saw that.
I've never actually heard a defense of abstinence. Every time it's brought up, it seems to be a really one-sided deal.
Gazai win $5 again. Another 5 for you, Steve. Talks like these would make Hitchens proud. Hashtag church is to blame. Good night, all. Good night, Gazai win.
Night.
And thank you. And by the way, I mean, I'm serious. You know what? Again, there's a much higher, demonstrably higher. They have done these. They have gone down. They have handed out condoms. It does work. Okay, especially over abstinence. But again, even if it didn't, it's worth a shot because the abstinence does not work. Okay, it just doesn't. There's been so many studies done on this, and I think you know this, Bragg. It does not work. Abstinence is bullshit.
Let's say for
No, hold on. There have been. I don't know. I know there have been many studies done against abstinence. I think there have been some problems with those studies, and I think there have been studies that are pro-abstinence.
But you can say that for everything. Please cite the ones that lead you to that conclusion. Look,
you can literally say that.
I can say
arrows.
that I think there were some problems done with the scientific research that led to the understanding of molecules demand human evolution. I can say that from hell to high water, and it's not going to change the fact that the studies have been done on that particular science and came to a single conclusion.
No. Look,
And-
I understand. I'm just at this point in time when I'm in the position I'm in right now in this debate. I just don't happen to have.
If he doesn't have them, he doesn't have them.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah,
It's discussion. But by the way, somebody asked me in the live chat a while back, and I know you got to go here soon, but they asked me a good question. Does Steve believe in evil? Yes. And when I'm talking about the word evil,
Evil can evil. Yeah, boy.
you don't need to invoke some kind of supernaturalism to have evil. Evil means a very specific term.
You can have evil and subjectivism.
You can have natural evil.
But it's meaningless.
A hurricane. No, it's not.
It's not meaningless.
Church's subjective evil is meaningless. That's
No,
what I
it's
was saying.
not. I
It's
don't
not
think-
meaningless because it's
No.
meaningless within its subjective context. It's
Right.
meaningful within its subjective
Well,
context.
it's fine. Even if
But
it's
you don't
something
have
that you
to
just
ultimate
apply
anything.
constantly to the same attribute, then it means something.
I'm so sick of these people not understanding what subjectivism is.
No.
Especially-
I get it's meaningful in like the individual subjective context, but if it's just in that subjective context and you can't identify it as a universal of some point,
Why does it have to be a
Yeah,
universal?
I don't give a shit if it's universal.
Why does it ever have to be a
If I
universal?
say harming kids is evil, last thing I give a shit about it if it's universal or not. All I know is that the action should be taken is to harm kids. That is what my goal is, not to harm kids.
Well,
That's all I care about.
Well, if it's not universal, then how can you say it's really wrong? Because if it's really wrong, it should be equally wrong in any situation.
Hold on. I can address that. You can say it's wrong within the subjective context in which it happened, which has already been addressed, by the way.
But why does that subjective context matter in the whole scheme of things? Why should I care about, this subjective context?
Because you're a moral person.
Yeah, don't you have apathy?
Because you are in that subjective
Hold on.
context.
I just heard Rag said, because don't I have apathy?
Empathy.
Empathy? Okay, fine. Why does my empathy matter? Why should that be a consideration in what's evil?
You can push this goalpost back as far as you want.
Exactly.
It doesn't change.
Why should I do this? Why should I do that?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's my point.
No, correct. The whole point. No, it is based on something. The whole point of normative ethics is for what you should do. Now, again, you could push these goalposts back to fucking Mars, but when the day is fucking done, when the rubber meets the road, the correct action to take is not to harm children. Period.
There is no correct action.
No.
No. You don't get to make that argument. No.
On what authority do you make that argument?
Ned, hang on. Are you telling me that I am unjustified to say that the end result should be you don't harm kids? Are you telling me that? Seriously?
No. I'm not saying that you're unjustified in saying it. I'm saying your justification for why it's right is bad.
Bullshit. That's moral subjectivism. That is a justificatory reason. That literally is a type of justificatory reason, dude.
I know it's a type. That doesn't make it right, though.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Oh my god!
No. This is the point. This is what we were getting into on Twitter.
You can appeal to any kind of ethical position you want.
Yeah, but you can appeal to stuff, but that doesn't make it right. Do you believe in objective right and wrong in certain things? Like, do you believe that an apple? Well, do you believe an apple is an apple? Do you believe a surfboard is a surfboard? Are those objectively right things?
No,
do these milk arrowroots objectively exist, or are they just subjective imaginations of my mind?
Exactly.
No, neither. They're mereological nihilism. But anyways, what I appeal to is what I appeal to. What's serious? These are all independent.
I appeal to the veil of ignorance personally. Just saying.
Which that's
Rawls is gross. Ew.
That's more of a pragmatic approach, but yeah.
I'm a pragmatist. Of course I have a pragmatic approach.
Oh, you can be a pragmatist without buying into Rawls. Rawls is just...
You can. Well, considering pragmatism was born from three people disagreeing on what pragmatism is, I'm fairly certain I
will tell you this. A long time ago on my Facebook, I was a friend with John Rawls' daughter. Her name's Elizabeth Rawls. And I actually was trying to get Elizabeth Rawls on this channel to talk about John Rawls' book, and this was several years ago. But unfortunately, she didn't want to speak for her dad. But how cool would that be? Because if anybody don't know, The Veil of Ignorance is actually from a guy named John Rawls. He's a very prolific, or he was a prolific writer in justifications and legal proceedings and morality when it comes to the law. And one of the things he talked about was called The Veil of Ignorance. But I really wish that I would have got her on here, because that would have been amazing. Because we used to talk about all this kind of stuff, but she won't do it live. But how cool is that?
Oh, that's a bummer.
I know.
I mean, I think Rawls is trash, but it would have been interesting all the same.
His book is required reading in law school still.
I don't know about. I'm talking from a philosophical perspective. He might have been good for
Why do you think The Veil of Ignorance is kind of I mean, it makes sense. I mean, seriously.
Well, because it depends on what your conception of just or fair is going into how you want the pie divided up if you don't know where your lot in is society. Because to say that everybody would want to say, well, if I don't know where I'm in, I don't want I'll just say I want an equal share of the pie.
Oh, no, I think you're having a mistake. No, they don't get to decide that. The people giving it out, they're the ones to decide that. And the whole point is they shouldn't base it upon what race somebody was or what gender there was. And it should be, all these should be done without those bias and considerations.
Okay, I get the non-biased thing, but I don't think you need. I don't think it's necessary to have the veil of ignorance to prove that A. And B, I think there was a little bit more. I think when Rawls originally wrote it, if I'm reading what he wrote correctly, and feel free to correct me, it seemed like there was a greater implication or a greater emphasis on sort of a distributive economic justice is what he was sort of vying towards as he was using that metaphor.
Yes. Yeah, and he also talks about restorative justice and reparative justice and a few other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like from a legal standpoint, I can understand why it's important to study him. And from a legal standpoint, he might have some cases. I happen to think that you could probably make the same cases he's making without using the veil of ignorance. I think the veil of ignorance relies on. My problem is I just think it relies on too many presuppositions about what people think is fair and just, and about how it seems to smuggle in some answers. It seems to be begging the question in some ways, in my mind.
Again,
Oh my God!
I'm
Begging the
I'm
question.
I don't read much Rawls. I just, like I said, it just goes back a long time, so I'd have to like brush up on it. But anyways, we are getting late. We're over 2 hours, and I know Prague's got to go. Let me just wrap this up with a couple. If anybody's got some questions from the live chat, what do you got for us? Because I wanted to touch on that with evil. Because again, you can have natural evils. A hurricane is a natural evil. So yeah, I think evils do exist, at least the way I use them, and that's why the whole thing with the evidential problem evil is that evils exist, natural and moral evils.
If hurricanes are evil, I'm about to have a bunch of that.
Yeah. By the way, stay safe. Where you're going to be? When does it hit you? Like tomorrow?
Soon, yeah. I'm in the Georgia-North Carolina state line, so it shouldn't be too bad. It's supposed to have kind of dissipated by the time it gets this far inland.
I'm closer to west/North Georgia, so I'm not going to experience as much.
What city?
Cartersville.
That's not too far from me.
Somebody says moral is an adjective, not a noun. I disagree. I think it could be either.
It can be used as both, just like
an evil. It's something that is an evil that exists. That's a noun.
like amoral good is an adjective, but amoral is a noun.
The evil that men do lives after them, while the good is often interred in their bones. That's a noun. By the way, what is that from? Anybody know?
It's from
Friends,
Lord of
Romans.
the Rings, Two Towers.
No, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I've come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them, while the good is often interred in their bones.
Hey, I know that Iron Maiden song.
Caesar, Jesus. Bunch of cultural, anyways.
I know that once she did the whole Schmageg.
Hey, serious. I just checked. You live like 2 hours and 2.5 hours from me. You weirdo.
Weirdo.
That's oddly creepy.
All right. So, any other questions? And I know a friend of mine, Brack, was trying to get in. Sorry, buddy. It's just I don't want to have these things more than 2 hours, because I want these things to be watched, especially stuff like this that I find to be actually important rather than just us shooting the shit. These kinds of videos I do think have merit. I think they are worth watching.
I did see a question go by for me, or a statement rather. May I address it? It was something along the lines of, well, two questions I saw go by for me. One was, crap, where'd it go? Okay, yeah, here it is. Both sides have agreed harming children is wrong. One demands something be done with it. The other demands justification for the position. No, I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for it to be justified. I'm fine with just saying harming children is wrong and not getting into the philosophical discussion of why it's wrong.
Good.
I'm happy to take action against. I'm happy to take action against it. And to answer another question that came up about what reforms specifically I'd want to see, I would refer you to the discussion I had with Godless Cranium on the Non Sequitur show, where I pretty much agreed almost entirely with him on the reforms that were necessary, including an independent government inquiry into various dioceses and various church happenings. Some more openness with the actual civil authorities in the countries in which the church is operating. Possibly like bans on the tax exemption status of guilty dioceses and things like that. And I think that was the only other question for me.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that you are at least willing to recognize that there definitely needs to be dramatic and sweeping changes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's better than most people.
That's a start.
That's way better than what we hear from people like what's his name? I don't want to blemish your channel, Steve.
The White Engine.
He's one of them. He's whataboutism 3.0. No, the other one was a fucking classical theist.
Oh, he's another winner. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, there are certain people that rather get bogged down in nuances, and I can have those discussions. I'm not a complete illiterate when it comes to these topics. I can get to the myopic detail on some of this stuff, but I don't think that there's a need to when it comes to some of this stuff. And I think you, pragmatic, that you actually will recognize that is enough just to say causing harm to a child is the reasons enough not to
Well,
cause harm to a child.
The problem you ran into, it was that, because of what was happening, you were then taking the step to, all right, let's abolish the church. And I think that's kind of where you got people.
Yeah, and again, maybe that can't happen. I don't know, but I do think that people speak more with their feet and with their money than anything else. And if the church had people have this exodus, then they would maybe do something faster because that affects them.
Yeah, because hanging them in the wallet is the only place where it actually hurts them.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Right. And I gotta tell you, man, if you're a parent and you just decide to stay in the church, that's one thing. But don't take your kids to any of them. Don't leave your kids with any of these people. I'm sorry. Don't take the chance. You're playing Russian roulette at this point. You really are.
That was actually
Yeah.
the argument that I made against Cardinal Burke, because I said, you know what, I'm not going to personally tell anybody to leave the Catholic Church. I'm not. And when I did my video on Cardinal Burke, I specifically said so. But what I did say is, please use the same level of protection for your children that you would do when you're teaching them street smarts for going out and walking with a friend.
Right.
You generally teach your children the buddy system pretty early. That way, if they're walking outside, they don't get kidnapped or they don't get harmed in any way, shape, or form. So why would you leave them alone with a priest? That's generally where I am. I'm not going to tell anybody to leave the Catholic Church, typically, unless they demonstrate that they probably shouldn't be there. But in that particular video, that's how I framed it, was, give them the same level of street smarts about their church as you do about everything else.
And if you want to contact Cyrus to do a collab with him so he'll make you out to be a raging meth head tweaker, you know where to find him. Okay? Good night.